Greetings and salutations.
How are we doing?
Okay, guys. I'm gonna just thanks everybody for connecting. This time around, we decided to. I think it's just best that everybody gets, instead of everybody going to and fro, that we run down a couple of questions and everybody gives their sort of input on the question, and then we move on to the next question and we go sort of until everybody's done, and then the next question. You know what I mean? So I'm going to kick it off, guys. Let's start with Mr. Clive Pearson.
Okay, yeah, nice one.
Tell me quickly, what was your first? I think that's what mystifies everybody. It mystifies me. It's always. I obviously thought metal started around there somewhere with Odyssey. I was very well informed by Mr. Mark Vass and Dean Smith that it was way before that. So, whoa. So tell me, what was your first exposure to heavy music in SA?
Yeah, so I've just written some stuff down here, so I'll just sort of go through it quickly.
Typical bass player has to write notes down.
No derogatory statements.
I've been getting them all day in rehearsals, mate, the whole day, and anyway. So yeah, it was. I mean, I was exposed to music. Yeah, so.
What triggered that moment where you thought?
Yeah, I think. Because when I was young, I always listened to music, basically, always listened to music. And then, my mum bought me a little turntable. And then the first exposure I had was actually the Band of Gypsies and Suzi Quattro. Those are the first acts that I really saw that got me sort of going, in that sense. So yeah, well, once I saw Suzi Quattro and Band of Gypsies, and I used to see small bands at parties maybe, but it was all apartheid. So there was no gigs. There was like discos that I could go to and see cover bands, and I looked at the music and it was amazing, the drummer and all that. So I started I had an older brother, so his mates were all listening to Jimi Hendrix, Black Sabbath, the early stuff, the really early, as I said, Uriah Heep. And then I got into AC/DC in the 74, 75. And then that's when I started. That was my heavy metal. As soon as I started listening to AC/DC, then that was it. And then my brother, he was older than me. So obviously I got exposed to the older brothers' mates and their music, which they introduced me to that music, really. Because my brother was not really into the heavy metal stuff. He was into Supertramp and all that sort of stuff, you know what I mean? So, and then Chris Gaskill bought me he was playing with my brother, like in the 80s, 79, maybe 79. And I bought a bass guitar off him.
Yeah,
and then I started playing bass because my brother was drumming. Remember, Chris? Yeah, I bought that 30-pound bass for 30 Rand off you. Yeah. And I started playing with my brother because he was a drummer. It was great. So, and then obviously we started playing with First Hand, and then I went to London in 84. So then that was it. And then when I come back, that's when Lee was managing Lynx. So I was in the right time, in the right place all the time, because when Mark decided to move on and go somewhere else, I joined Lynx. Only because obviously Lee was the manager, and I was adequate enough to do it. But and that's the same when I started playing bass. I think Chris was playing with Lee, and then Lee joined another band in that bass. Mark Proctor. Actually, the first band I took was First Hand with Mark Proctor in 79, 80, and he left to play with I think Black Rose, and then I joined First Hand when he left, basically. So my first band was with my brother. And then we went for years. And then I joined Axis, which was a cover band with Dave Bickus, Ernie on vocals, Boyd, and my brother and I. And then I came to London for a year. And then when I come back, then I joined Lynx for 2 years. And then I went back to London, basically.
Very incestuous in those days.
Yeah, there was no music. We could only listen to the radio, really. And when we were like 9, 10, 9, 10, 11. It was shit, wasn't it? I couldn't afford cassette tapes and all that stuff, so I managed to buy a couple of top 20 albums, top of the hit 20 albums. Remember those albums that used to come out?
Sound
yeah, that's it. So that's how I got into heavy metal.
Sounds wild, even better.
Yeah, my mum picked up that. I think my mum picked up that I was always listening to music from a young age, and that must be why I kept pursuing it and eventually learned to play the bass, you know.
Can I just chime in here and share a quick story? I know we did it on the other story, but a quick, and Dean, this is the weirdest fucking thing. I mean, Dean Smith and I go back since fucking Jesus was a baby, but I remember watching Lynx in my hometown of Benoni. And Benoni is known for wanting a Charlize Theron. We all know Charlize Theron. Actually, in the Brandwacht Hoerschool with my cousin, funny enough. But anyway, so I remember Lynx playing at the Battle of the Bands. We said the Lido Biscope, they turned it into a venue, and I think I was 14 or 15. Somehow managed to sneak in, and was the Kamikazes, the punk band, was Lynx, and it was Rome, which you said became Radio Rats, and then we had a band called Chicks, which has got Fran Hilton was in the band, which obviously she went on to become a very, very famous football coach for Bayana in South Africa, etc. Awesome chick, right? And no, Freudian chick, and the Chicks won the gig, but the band that fucking stuck out for me was Lynx. I mean, they were just outstanding, and to me, that was one, I must say, probably the very first metal band that I saw as a kid. I thought, fuck, I want to do that shit, was Lynx. At that fucking in Benoni of all places.
That was Tony Granger, very good musician. I mean, he's a very successful marketing now. But he was he wrote the songs, you know.
Tony Granger was in Tyrant before then.
Is this the very Tony Granger that became a successful art director?
Yes. He went to New York, became the director of fucking Saatchi and Saatchi in New York.
I used to worship that guy for the stuff they. Wow,
unbelievable! He's so good, and I got to know him really well because with my brother when I was with the Lynx, and then he went to America after that advert with the Beat the Benz. When he did that advert, Beat the Benz,
Beat the Benz.
That's the Americans phoned him up, and he was out of there like a shot, man. Yeah, absolutely gone.
Yeah,
best movie he could have done, obviously.
He used to be across the road from me in Berario.
But we all grew up in the school, you see, me, Chris, Tony Granger, and don't forget, we've got to mention the Asylum Kids, because they were a big influence, although they weren't metal, but they got a record deal because no one would fucking, the government didn't want it, or the radios wouldn't touch them, and we gave them a record deal, and they were part of that initial, from Chris, me, Tony Granger, Stevie, and that we were like school, and that was the core clan of the metal heads at school, you know.
Yeah, Silent Kids was like big for us punks.
They were really. Because do you remember Midnight Flyer? Do you remember the promoter Midnight Flyer? We worked with him, and he recorded the Asylum Kids, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
In Yeovil, he had a studio in Yeovil, Midnight Flyer in 81 time. Yeah. So we got to know them through him, really.
Were you talking about that whole Berario sort of Northcliffe, that time? Do you guys remember a bass player? He came across from Denmark as a young kid and went to Brighton High, called Chris Haleman.
No, I know who he is, though. But
I don't know if he was hanging out with you guys, but I know he knows Nicky Corns as Krach, as I call him, Chris, which is a good mate of ours. He lived in South Africa and formed with Bernie Torme and Phil Lewis. They had a band called Torme. Phil Lewis went on to LA Guns. Chris went on to join Shark Island in LA. Now back here living in the UK. At Shark Island. No, it's a weird South Africa. What's this thing with these bass players? Like they seem to fucking all come out of that part of the world and then ship off overseas.
How many SA guys were in all these bands? Amazing.
Yeah.
Plenty.
Shark Island, I followed them for a while, yeah. Can we move on to who else we got here? I need to see.
Go Gary Walker. Have to give it to Gary. The legend of Razor. Oh my god. The fucking hairs on my arms standing up, bro. Honestly, I don't think I've ever watched every metal band in those days that I got a hard on so quickly, but that was fucking Razor.
Okay, Gary, you're up. What tickled your fancy in the beginning?
What you mean? What got me into playing?
What raised your arm hair up?
It's a weird story because I started playing when I was 14. At the time, kind of was into music, but never thought I'd play. And then one kind of Saturday afternoon, I was coming back from playing a soccer game, And there was this guy just sitting on the pavement jamming on an acoustic guitar. So I stopped, watched this dude playing for a bit, and he said, "Do you want me to teach you a couple of chords?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'll never be able to do that." So he says, "No, it's easy, you know what I mean? I can show you 3 chords and you can play dozens of songs with this stuff." So anyway, I sat down, he showed me some stuff, wasn't quite getting it. But after that, we became kind of friends, and he showed me how to play a bit. And then he said, "Let's put a band together." He said he's got a mate who plays bass, and I want to play drums. So I'm like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." But at the time, I was getting very much into Grand Funk. That was kind of my
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus, I love that band, eh?
And that bass player, Mel Shacher, he's still my favorite bass player. To this day.
That was Railroad, wasn't it? The album Railroad?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And the minute I heard that dude play bass, I said, "That's the instrument I'm going to play." So myself and the drummer, myself and the guy who was playing bass at the time switched. He started playing drums, I started playing bass. And that was Heavy Weather. That was my first band. And the dude,
Heavy Weather, okay.
yeah, and the dude that got me into playing was Tony Groenewald, who I still jam with today.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember him.
You know?
Yeah.
Wow. And Tony Groenewald just played with Off the Edge, all those bands.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh,
All those vinyls. I mean, that is a musician of note, like international standard, for sure. Wow.
yeah. So anyway, Tony and I still play together today. We've got like a recording outfit called Sundays at 11. We're busy doing our 5th album now, so we still play, you know. Anyway, so I was in this band Heavy Weather. We started out like knowing maybe 3 chords between us, and we got better as time went by. We ended up doing some pretty big gigs. I mean, we supported Stingray at Club Chicago back in the day, you know.
Yes.
But then I went into the army 2 years, got out, the band reformed. Then I got called up for a camp, and while I was away, Tony joined another band. So I came back at a loose end, put up an ad, and I got a call from Carl Apples Riley. So yeah, so they had a band together called Banish. It was Carl, Rolf, another drummer, and a singer called Alan Madden. I don't know if you guys know him.
I remember the name.
Yeah, anyway, so that was Banish. We were doing like top 40 stuff. Then we got in Joe Day as a vocalist.
Wow.
Yeah, and we were doing a lot of female vocal stuff at the time because of Joe, doing like Kim Wilde, Pat Benatar, that kind of stuff. And then Joe left to join a band called Roxanne, who were the resident band at Club Chicago. And so we stuck without a vocalist, so we decided Rolf was playing keyboards at the time, and we said, "You it, dude, you now the singer." So Rolf went out front, and we also decided at the time we wanted to do heavier stuff, you know. So we went up to Hillbow Records, bought a pile of fucking vinyl, and just started learning stuff off the album, you know, and started gigging as a heavier band. Went through a few drummers, landed on Ian. Great fucking drummer, was a real coup for us to get him at the time. Then we were offered a residency down in PE, but we said to our agent, we were with the agency called Progressive Productions, and we said to the dude, "Look, we want to play rock." He says, No, I sent your set list down to the owner of this club, and he's happy that you do your stuff. So we're like, cool. We head down to PE. Opening night, we open with Number of the Beast. So we had this thing we used to do. Rolf used to come on in like a dog collar, and he had this like leather-bound book that was supposed to be like a Bible, and then we used to have the intro, woe to thee, the whole thing. So we opened with this. We had a smoke machine, the whole fucking thing going, and these dudes they came in to hear the Bee Gees. Now they're hearing Maiden.
Okay.
These dudes sat there like with big eyes checking us out. So we did this like for maybe 2 weeks. And the owner of the club calls us and he says, you dudes are going to have to do more top 40 stuff. So we were like, I'd love to say we stuck to our guns and said, fuck you, we're a metal band. But of course, we now like see ourselves as pro musers. We're earning our money making music. So we buckled down. We said, okay, we'll do some top 40, which we did. But we tried to stick to the rock stuff. I mean, we were doing stuff like Steve Miller Band, Sammy Hagar. There was a Tube song called Talk to You Later, a really cool song. We were doing that. Anyway, we went through the residency. Then we were supposed to go on to Pietermaritzburg, and the gig fell through. So we came.
Surprised.
Yeah. So we came back to Joburg, and at the time I was having some issues with Carl and Rolf because of a chick I was involved with who caused a lot of cut. And they basically gave me an ultimatum: either you get rid of this chick or you out of the band. So I played hard ass and told him, fuck you, I'm out.
That's quite a familiar story, eh?
Yeah. So I left. Mark Proctor came in to replace me. And then about 6 months later, I got a call from Vince Hall, drummer, very nice drummer, who was also in Black Rose, by the way. And Vince said, like, a mate of his, Johnny, had just come back from the UK. And they were getting something together. Do I want to come in? So I said, cool. And that turned out to be Razor,
Wow.
So so that's how it all started. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, but I'm not going to hog the whole thing. And in PE, we played at a club called the Ritz.
I remember there was that old hotel that was in PE that used to do rock gigs and stuff, like a very old hotel. I think it was broken down a few years back.
Yeah, the club there was called Is American.
Yeah.
And the resident band at that time was Bernie Miller. Do you remember Bernie Miller?
Yeah.
A Circus, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And interestingly, my old mate Tony Groenewald was in Bernie's band at the time playing bass. So that's how the story all goes around,
I mean, the only venues I was playing in those early days was the Stage Door, the Ambassador, the Chelsea, and the York Hotel around the corner from the Chelsea. There was the Oxford's maybe, but there was only the venue. There wasn't many venues because they were all clubs and discos there, like Gary played. You know what I mean? But there was very few heavy metal places to play.
Oh yeah.
In the early 80s.
Did you play at the Oxford Hotel?
Yeah, that's
in Montreux there.
Yeah, we did a gig there because there was that crispy, greedy boys, Crisps. Lee was managing us, and he wanted us to play the shopping centres because we could get dressed up and makeup and shit and go around the shopping centres doing the crispy boy, greedy boy Crisps. But we also said it's actually Gary, we said, no, we're not selling out, man. Well, I didn't, but the rest of the band said, we're not selling out. Well, okay, we would have made loads of money, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that in. The Ambassador and the Stage Door, really, and Plum Crazy were the only places I really played.
The Plum Crazy, yeah, that was classic. Gary, what happened to the chick?
Well, we've got a kid together and a grandchild. So
nice one.
But it never lasted, of course.
Wow, we're so young, weren't we? Fuck, man.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, we're on to Mr. Vincent Weynen. Give us your story.
My story. Can you hear me?
Yo.
Yeah.
Oh, well, my story. Well, I was an immigrant in South Africa. I came from Belgium with my parents in 1981. And first we lived in Joburg a little while. And then we went to Pretoria. And I played guitar because my dad was also a guitar player. He taught me how to play the guitar. And when I was 14, I think in 1981, I started picking it up more and more and more. I started playing, got to know some school kids like Andor Barishka. I actually dated his sister. And And then one day, we went to the Oktoberfest in the
Just
German
so that
school.
you know, Osiris split up because of that sister.
Oh, fuck you, man.
Always a woman involved.
Jesus. Konrad, that's 40 years ago. Please, let me go.
Okay, no more.
No. In any case, I met Konrad at the beer fest at the German school, and we got nicely drunk. And Konrad will do his part of the story too, I think. But afterwards, hey, you like heavy metal? Yeah, me too. Yeah, let's do something.
That's standing in the bogs.
Yeah, we were standing in the toilet.
He comes next to me with his metal jacket, and I go, "Oh, do you dig metal?" And he goes, "Yeah, but now I'm a bit older than Vince, so my knowledge of metal was like at the most Black Sabbath in those days and Rainbow and those boys."
And I was already wearing a jacket.
He comes in with this Metallica, and I go, "Who the fuck's Metallica?"
But I think the influence that I got, first of all, to say where we started playing metal or where I started playing metal was because I had still lots of contact with my friends in Belgium, and they were exposed to all the new wave of British heavy metal stuff. They were sending it to me via tapes in those days. Put it in an envelope, send it to South Africa. 2 weeks later, I get the tape. It was fantastic, actually, in those days. It was really, I mean, now everything goes so quick. In those days, we really had to take the time to receive the stuff and to listen to it. And we used to do that together. So me and Konrad and Andor and his sister and Madeleine, who was the guitarist of Osiris, who was then Konrad's girlfriend also.
Thank God I was in those days, because if it was now, the tape would never arrive.
No, exactly.
First then.
Most probably. But anyway, we and Konrad was staying at this a commune. Remember, Connie?
White House.
The White House, with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's brother was staying there too. And we used to rehearse in a small little room. Remember, Konrad?
Yeah.
Right in the garden of I think of the White House. You could basically the only thing you could fit in there was a drum kit, but we actually fitted the other 3-4 musicians in there too. And we rehearsed.
I used to stand on a chair to do the vocals because there was no place.
Basically.
And the whole room is a sweat box. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then at 10 o'clock, we used to finish the rehearsal and say, okay, let's go out for drinking now. But Madeleine always used to say, no, that was basically the beginning for me for Osiris. Osiris is a long story. It started in Pretoria, I think. Before that, we even started gigging. The whole story with taking to Cape Town, because Konrad and Madeleine moved to Cape Town. And that's actually where Osiris really started playing. And then to come back to Pretoria a couple of years later and me joining again. So and in the meantime, I was playing with Viking in Johannesburg in Pretoria, because the actual guitarist from Viking from Cape Town came to Pretoria, and actually Osiris in Pretoria started playing with the drummer of Viking. It's like,
I found that piece interesting the other night. You posted it on the chat group. I mean, I had no clue that Osiris actually was based in Cape Town for a while. And I mean, you know, the earliest metal band that I remember from Cape Town, they weren't really a metal band, was like Fallout or something. So it's bloody interesting to me. And if you guys can maybe talk about that for a bit, it would be fantastic.
I'll tell you about
Cape Town part is Konrad. I mean, he's the one that.
Yeah, the Cape Town.
Can I just ask you a question quickly before Konrad carries on? As far to my knowledge, Osiris was the first thrash band in South Africa, as far as I'm concerned. It was the first band I know of that played Celtic Frost covers, Metal Church, and Venom.
Let's call it proto thrash, you know, like the, yeah.
I don't know if Vincent or Konrad, if you guys know of anyone before yourselves.
Well, I think that the thrash chapter started when Osiris came back from Cape Town to Pretoria, because the big influence there, I think, was Andor from Switzerland, who loved Metallica, Slayer, Celtic Frost. Metal Church came from my side, I think, and And that's how we I think that it's like the second wave of Osiris that became thrash in 1985 or something like that. So were we the first thrash metal band in South Africa? I think yes.
Yeah,
I think so. To be honest,
I would go with that. And to tag on to Dean there, sorry we're hijacking this thing, but we're just connecting all the dots here because we're the fans, right? Dean and I are the young fans. Is that
let me tell you something. I never thought I'd see the day that I will sit with all of these O's on at the same time. I'm like a fucking bro.
Yeah, I know too. I mean, I generally don't drink, but I'm drinking tonight. But I remember watching Osiris at a fucking club in Pretoria. I don't remember what it was because I think I was on the Colombian marching powder, but we'll just edit that. And was it Jacqueline's or something where the Osiris shocked the fuck out of everybody that came to watch? I'm not sure what they were expecting.
Jacqueline's.
Konrad had all the spikes on his arms. I mean, I was like, what? I mean, I'd never heard this shit before. And it was just unfucking believable. I mean, Razor, Lynx, and all the Black Rose were great. And then, no disrespect to that sort of section of the music, but then going to Pretoria, of all places, and going to see Osiris, I was like, you've got to be fucking joking. This is just off the charts, man. I remember those days. Where was that? Jacqueline's? I can't remember where that gig was.
I don't know which gig you're talking about, but the one where we had the whole stage up, set up and everything.
Yeah.
I think it was a musical conservatoire.
Okay, so what we did is, so that's quite interesting. So Jack Hammer actually, well, it wasn't Jack Hammer. Raven used to play at a place called the Music Conservatoire of Pretoria, and then they shot off pyrotechnics the one night, and then they got banned. And when we started with the whole Osiris thing, I always said, well, we got to go fucking huge. So we're going to have a massive stage show because I didn't dream small in those days. I dreamt I was going to be like the next fucking superstar of the world, you know what I mean? I was going to like be at the Playboy Mansion, all that type of cuck. That was like my goal. But we then approached these guys with a long story that we were launching. Okay, but anyway, so we had to approach these guys with a long thing that we were doing a music launch and everything, and they eventually gave the okay for us. Needless to say, after we finished that night, the Music Conservatoire of Pretoria banned all rock music out of their system. Yeah, just to quickly go back, I'm not going to give my whole background. I'll tell you where it all started. So when I was little, I think one of the first heavy bands that I knew word for word was the Sweet Ballroom Blitz or something like that. Yeah. And then obviously, I think my first album I ever bought was Black Sabbath Volume 4. I think I was in Standard 4. And I loved that album. I still love it. I still love it today. My other big thing was Caught in the Act, Grand Funk. Oh, what an album. And I just used to love these guys. And then Standard 8, I sort of wanted to start forming a band, but it only really happened after I came out of the army and I was in Pretoria Technikon at the art school, and I played with a bunch of guys and they crapped me out because I always said, no, this is not heavy enough. But they were into talk and all that stuff. And then I met this crazy kid, Vincent. But then as far as the Cape Town, because I think that's the part you guys really want to know, Vince sort of touched on all this stuff that happened in Pretoria. So Cape Town was actually quite amazing because when I was at the art school, Div's other sister, Marita, was also studying with me. And she started going, well, she met Russell because Russell's one friend was in the army in Pretoria, Russell de Villiers. And Russell was a really, really flippant, potent, excellent, really good drummer. And he said, well, come to Cape Town. Being students, let's go to Cape Town. We're going to rock it. And we then started playing. Madeleine was on guitar, a guy called Andrew Seba. I don't know if any one of you knew Neil Seba. He's actually in LA at the moment. He does like a lot of music soundtracks and so on. So we played with his brother. Russell was on drums. I'm trying to think who the bassist was. I think a guy called Stewart that actually played with Viking for a while as well. Vince, you can help me out here if you think I'm wrong. But so we played.
Stewart was the bassist of Viking.
Yeah, then the very first gigs that we did was in the Libertas Hotel in Goodwood, I think.
Parow, yeah, on the corner of Parow, Goodwood, yeah.
That's right. So we did some of our gigs there. That's where I met Brian from the council that used to play with Kevin Shirley and so on. He was the vocalist.
Is this the Kevin Shirley of Iron Maiden fame?
Yeah. Kevin Shirley, producer, that's doing, what did he do now? He recently did, he's doing one of the metal bands now as well. I'm not sure. But anyway, so we sort of then played Cape Town. We played at a gig close to the old Cape Town, that big flea market there in the square.
Oh, the city hall.
Yeah, there was a market there, and upstairs there was like a marimba club, which then started playing us, and we played in a battle of the bands there, that Shifty Records, that was, and I think the band who won that night was a band called Abazabenzi, and I remember the guys came to us and said, you actually had won the battle of the bands, but we can't sell your music, nobody's going to buy it.
Yeah. Okay? That was Shifty Records, eh?
Shifty Records, yeah. Okay, so I remember that, and then we moved back to Gauteng or Transvaal in those good old days, and Vince and I then sort of sat down and just sort of planned that whole gig, and obviously him and I were the two main contributors financial-wise. It cost us a bloody fortune in those days doing that whole show, renting the equipment. It was quite cool because I knew all the kids from art school that studied with me. We studied theatre craft, so they did our lighting. The only guys who didn't do anything properly were the sound guys, which were some music shop in Pretoria.
They were great. They built props for us. They did a whole lot of stuff for us. They were really a big help in pulling the show off, which we could put down then.
It's amazing how resourceful one gets, especially with our limited availability in Africa, you know.
Yeah, and in those days it was really hard because you didn't have anything. Nobody listened to the music. I remember walking around, like looking at people who wrote, especially in Pretoria, Snor City, Bible verses on our posters. You know what I mean? And
guys, here's a little story, just quickly. Us in Namibia, when we played our first couple of shows, I remember going to the music store to get some new strings and possibly look at a new amp. And I remember the sales lady of the music store actually creeping up on me very slowly and asking me, "Is it true that you guys are satanic?"
We can say a lot about that.
Of course, then the famous one in Pretoria with us with our long hair was calling us Steekmoeder.
Yeah. Konrad, I just want to quickly, before everybody joins, that stint in Cape Town, what years are we talking about here now? Like 86, 87?
No, shit, it was before then. I think most probably 85, 84, 85.
Well, the gig from the music conservatoire was in 1985, I think, or 1986, either 5 or 6.
85, I think.
And so that was after you guys moved from Cape Town back to Joburg, to Pretoria. Yeah. So
and the Cape
Town must have been about 84, 85, right?
Yeah. I think it was 85 or 86, one of the two, not 84. That was too early. I think they were still in Cape Town then. But what we did have was we had this big Anubis on our posters for the gig in the music conservatoire. Yeah. And because the church was actually owner also of the music conservatoire or whatever, they phoned us. I think it was only a week in advance. Correct me, Konrad. They told us to change the posters, which we actually hung up all over Pretoria. And then we quickly made copies of the 4 band members to go and stick it over the posters of.
That's right. Shit, I forgot about that.
Remember that?
Because of Anubis, the god.
Buddy, we're stressed, but
well, that cat thing, yeah.
Like an evil.
You see what I mean. One of the things I picked up in the admin chat or in the chat was that Konrad and them had some connection. They even made these statues, paper mache, I think, statues of these things which they had on the stage.
Yeah.
I'd fucking love to know what happened to all that.
So I'll tell you, that set was actually very interesting because that set was used in the first production of Ida, the opera, at the State Theatre in Pretoria when it just opened. And because I did my practical at State Theatre, I knew of that set. So when we came up with the name and we decided we were going to do the show, I said to Vince, well, I know that you can rent the stuff from Pact. Props. And that's what we did. So the main part was actually the stairs going up with the drummer set. That was from the opera. And I think that big Anubis head was also from the opera. The interesting fact was those stairs were actually used then again 2 years later in the flamenco production at the State Theatre again with Jose Montoya and so on.
Yeah,
I actually did the sound for
we used to rehearse there.
I'll tune you something quickly about that gig. Besides Black Sabbath playing at Sun City, that's the first gig I ever checked in South Africa that was on like an international level, as in the stage props and the stage setup and everything. It was fucking
I'm not worthy. Thank you, Diz.
My bro, it was fucking incredible, let me tell you, bro.
Check out what Chris is flashing there. I see a Black Sabbath thing there. Beware.
Sun City. Sign.
But the Sun City. Oh my God, you got the poster, dude. That must be worth some cash.
Oh, don't show Mark that. He's going to want to buy it from you.
No, I was just about to say, how much do you want? Fucking know me too well.
And actually, Ian Simpson actually gave me this because he knew I was a massive fan.
Wow. That's fucking super collectible. How much do you want for it? Anyway, back to one as the mediator, facilitator, and you and Greg.
We'll talk about it later.
Call me.
Yeah. I would like to move on to Mr. Gaskill.
What was the question?
your first trigger point. We're still at question 1.
Yeah.
Chris is still the same.
Age 10 years old, into the Sweet, Slade, glam rock. That moved
Gary
on.
Glitter.
Not quite Gary Glitter, no, but that sort of stuff. Then we went on to Black Sabbath, Uriah Heep, moved on to that. And then basically wanted to play guitar, wanted to play bass. That moved on, went to South Africa, high school, watching high school bands. There's a band called Speed, which had Tony Granger in.
Wow.
And they used to do covers of Thin Lizzy, Black Sabbath.
Hazy. Wow.
Me and my mate was Mark Palm, Nipper, as Gary knows him, Clive knows him. Other people may know him. He's got quite a good reputation as a bit of a troublemaker. And we were mates, and we learned how to play guitar together. Then we joined up with Tony Granger from this band called Speed. Other bands in between. And then we formed Tyrant. We did a few gigs. We all used to rehearse in this building in Joburg, Razor, Black Rose. We all had the same building. We were all in there. We would basically go in there with a few tins of beer, go and rehearse, play a few numbers, and then you'd go next door and see what the other band was doing, see which covers they were doing. Okay, so Razor were doing Breaking the Law. Okay, we can't play that song. We've got to find another song to do. And that's how we just sort of all formed, really. But Black Rose were the sort of established band. Razor, I would say, with the second established band, and we were sort of coming up and seeing what was going on. And then we would get the gigs at the Golden Banana, play at Hell's Angels clubs, which was pretty daunting.
Daunting.
Yeah, pretty daunting.
Bikers,
yeah.
Metal.
But, as a kid, me and Nippy used to go watch a band of gypsies. So we can't fault them. They were a big part of our influences. So were Harlem Kids. Stephen Howell, used to know them. He used to live just around the corner from us. Used to watch him rehearse with his earlier bands. So it was all part of that music growing up. We just knew we were going to play music, me and Nipper. We got into a lot of trouble. Tyrant became basically, I think Gary went over to the UK with Vince. Was that right, Gary?
Yeah, that's right. And sent back straight back.
And they sent Gary back, and I was about to go to England, but we decided to get this band together called Unchained.
Oh,
and
yes.
we just basically played for a few months, but we learned all these songs. We were playing Wasp, Motorhead,
what?
All that. But quite a few of our own stuff, I think, Gary, didn't we? Me and you used to write.
Yeah, good tunes, man.
I remember Unchained. It was pretty good stuff, yeah. We did them a lot of time.
I knew I was going back to England, but we got this band together. But we used to always go back to my house for Bryce, and then we used to start getting this contingent from Pretoria, and I think possibly from Razor Times. Remember the Pretoria contingent?
Yeah.
They were into the heavier stuff. They were into the Venom. You know, and we hadn't heard of Venom before, and it's like, fucking hell, what the fuck is going on here with Venom? And it just got heavier and heavier, and it's just like, you got Metallica, and you just know that, okay, things were changing. From the old school, the Black Roses, the Razors, and the Unchained, it was moving on to a different direction, heavier. This is like when sort of thrash was first coming around. So this is where Vincent starts coming in with all the Pretoria side of things, which...
So it's your fault, Osiris.
I think Pretoria seemed to breed the heavier sort of sounds. But
Chris, sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask about that because even from Cape Town, I got into the music scene in sort of 1986 and around there, and even then I could notice there was a distinctive sound difference between bands from Johannesburg and bands from Pretoria.
Okay, that's interesting, but I think probably maybe it's living in Pretoria gives you that harder edge. I don't know. But I just remember them coming around. Remember, Gary, he used to come around to my place to Bryce.
Yeah.
And the Pretoria contingent came, and they would bring their tapes. It would be Venom. It wouldn't be the
proximity to Voortrekker Hoogte.
Well, it wouldn't be the Scorpions or that sort of stuff. It would be the heavier.
I think it had more to do with the fact that we had a better line with Europe. We got all the new stuff via Switzerland, Andorra, Belgium. So we got all the new stuff. So we were quicker maybe on the ball to start changing our music. It's Pretoria's got nothing to do with it. I think it's got to do with the link that the members in Osiris had with the old Continental.
That's it.
It's more that. And there's nothing with
We also had a very big German contingent in Pretoria, which at that stage, the German school, which a lot of the kids listened to the new stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I remember Andor and Vincent and the guys bringing the tapes back from Europe, and that's when Venom. I mean, Ralph Levine, when he used to have that Friday night rock and horror show.
Yeah.
I think he was probably the first DJ to play Venom and stuff like Metallica on radio in South Africa. But we were getting all the underground stuff from Vincent and Andor. So I kind of agree. I don't think Pretoria had anything to do with it. Was not so much to do with living in Pretoria. It was the guys that came from Pretoria. And that's how a lot of the thrash made it into
South Africa. Don't chin my bread. It was hard living in Pretoria.
I lived in fucking Rosettenville, my bro.
I is a Dutchman, and to fight other Dutchmen is like tough work.
You're right, my bro. You're right. I'm not saying it wasn't Pretoria, but I think
just joking.
But so Unchained was only brief, but we had a great time doing it, and I was always destined to go back to England. I wanted to go to play the Marquee and places like that. And eventually I did with other bands. So that was a bit of a result. And I met up with Carl from Black Rose, Ian, and we played in bands together over the next few years. and Vince from Razor. We all met over there, and we got into different bands and carried on playing in the UK. So it just carried on, you know.
Question, was that named after the Van Halen song?
It was indeed, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I thought, yeah, okay.
Sorry, just a butt in on Pretoria, because we did do a gig with Black Rose in Pretoria at this hall, and they had all these fucking fir trees on the front of the stage. Was anyone there? And they came absolutely pissed out their heads already because Mark was late. And they had, like, the stage was like there, and then they had these little fir trees all along the front of them. The Black Rose turned up and said, "We're not fucking going on there, mate. Get rid of them." You know what I mean? That was that was Black Rose and the band called I played with Dave Bickers and Boyd and Lee, Axis. We were called Axis. But yeah, I remember that gig with Black Rose. Yeah, in Pretoria, man. That was Pretoria. The only time we played Pretoria.
I don't even know about that gig.
It was like 1982, 83, I reckon it must have been.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually know what gig it was, and it was like, what was that fucking place?
It was like a whole day festival job, and Black Rose headlined. Indoors.
With fir trees in front of the stage.
Yeah.
No, you know what? It was a German club. I'll tell you now. It was
and we played with the fucking fir trees, all the bands except Black Rose. When Black Rose turned up, they made to take it down. We're standing there in front of these fir trees, you know what I mean? Not thinking anything. But yeah,
you know the place was called the Zillertal.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, but country with Clive Bruce. Okay, moving on.
Look, I'm going to interrupt quickly. I just for historical purposes, and I've got to fucking put this all into some sort of a timeline.
Yeah. No,
we've already gone through some of the bands, but so if you guys could answer, so Unchained was from and Lynx and Black Rose, which year to basically which year? I mean, that would be a really.
That was 1980
You're asking
to
these old
84.
fuckers. I don't even remember what they had for breakfast, Greg.
It must be 80 to 84, wasn't it? Lynx was around 82, 83.
Lynx was not 82.
No, 85, Lynx. Sorry.
You're smoking too much, mate. You're
smoking too much shit. Yeah, 85. Sorry, Lynx was 85.
Black Rose.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Black Rose first. First. Razor, Tyrant, Lynx and Unchained.
Yeah.
So 84, 85 era, yeah, because I left in 84.
And then we added to the UK.
Yeah, then we left for the UK 80. We all left for the UK in 84, though. Black Rose, me, everyone left at you.
No, but you came back, China.
Oh, I came back to Lynx, didn't I? Yeah, fuck yeah. Lynx was 86, wasn't it? 87. So, yeah, the original...
Greg, you shouldn't have asked the question. You should have sent it.
The drugs don't work.
This is not going to make your editing.
Drugs don't work. It's true, isn't it? But what I'll do is maybe if we all send just our timelines in of the bands we were in, just the timelines from those bands, yeah. Just send the timelines, yeah.
Come on, I'm dying to hear from Stretch, the legend.
Yes, Stretch.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute myself, okay? Because I'm going in the pub, okay?
Again.
You're going in the pub.
China.
Take a swift in the pub.
All right, man. Yeah, there's no hot women in here, unfortunately.
Oh, take us into the pub.
It's full of great.
See you later, China.
Okay, Stretch, take it away.
So the question was, what triggered an interest in heavy music?
What triggered your? Yeah. What? How did Lenny say it? What squeezed your lizard?
Well, there was music around. My grandmother used to play piano in the silent movies and stuff like that. So, but it was kind of different. Then I had the great pleasure of hearing an album called Fireball by Deep Purple.
Yeah.
And that kind of was a catalyst. I was actually playing drums at the time. Somebody said to me, you should listen to Ian Pace on this album. So I bought the album. I got halfway through the first side. I'm like, what's that? I want to do that, which was Richie. So that's kind of how that started. But, as far as the
Look at Gaskill. He's got everything. He's worse than Dean Smith. He's got the vinyl collection.
So as far as the heavy metal side of things goes, I mean, that's kind of band-wise the background: Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Zeppelin, these kinds of things. But you know, I was tending to a professional career, so I had managers who said, "Well, you can't be doing that. You need to be doing this." And we eventually had quite a successful quasi new wave band called the News. We actually charted before the SABC apparently pulled the single for having too much of an ethnic sound.
I have that in my collection.
Yeah.
News. Okay, that's cool.
So, but anyway, the News was often accused of veering into heavy metal territory, probably because of my predilections musically.
So, did you guys play Free People's Concert as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we were heavy on stage presentation and this kind of thing, so the heavy rock stagecraft applied very easily to what we were doing.
Mm.
But eventually, you know, we did a national tour and came back and just started doing the same old gigs again. And I was like, okay, I'm out. So I formed a band called Propaganda with the rhythm section from Void. Danny DeVette, Teddy Andalis, and a percussionist. And we played about 6 to 8 months around Cape Town. Well, I was a Cape Town guy, so I know that scene very well. And
all of a sudden, Greg's going, oh, he's from Cape Town. I get that, okay?
Yeah, but the club thing was dying around. It was like 82. So the club scene in Cape Town was in some poor shape. I was actually on the way to, around this time, putting a band together with Saverio Grande from SAC.
Oh.
We used to my wife and I used to drive around Cape Town with Savvy in his Vanden Pla Princess with a Rolls Royce grill and talk about this band. But HR was not what we would have hoped for. Plus, Savvy, yeah, very interesting stuff. I don't want to digress, but a couple of Savvy stories I mentioned to Mark, and he said, save it for now. First time I played with Savvy, he came around to a communal house in Kenilworth where I was jamming. And I mean, it was just like this powerhouse. And we were playing this thing, and the floor tom, I could see it start to settle on its legs. And it just fell on its side on the floor, and he kept pounding this thing. It didn't miss a beat. Just chasing this floor tom all over the place. But anyway, that sort of indicated to me this could be a good guy to have a band with, you know. But anyway, we set up a rehearsal with some of the people we were able to get hold of. And no Savvy. Eventually arrives reeking of fish in cut-off shorts. It says, sorry guys, the snook were running. So anyway, we ended up with Danny and Terry from Void, and we played Cape Town out for a while till about July. Then Danny and Terry said to me, come to Joburg. And I was a hardcore Cape Town guy, so I said, it'll change, I'll hang out here, try and do something. But they were right, I was wrong. So within a few months, we went up to Joburg. And then still because of the pro thing, we formed a cover band. Tried to play as many songs as possible with guitar breaks in there. But it was tough at that sort of mid-'80s time in South African clubs. So anyway, that eventually folded. My wife and I were expecting a kid, and I went and joined a music store as a manager, whatever, but kept playing. And then I formed BBC Paris, the Joburg version, with Aggie from Void and Terry again, and Danny's cousin on drums. And then we did a few gigs. We did something with Razor on a New Year's Eve and stuff like that. Because Gary and I mean, we're still.
Gary's nodding, so he remembers.
Gary and I are really close friends. So.
Give me a minute. I'll be back.
Hey? Yeah, because you're old now, Konrad. You need to go for a piss. We understand.
So, we were talking. BBC Paris eventually folded about 86. And Gary and I were talking about doing something. And then this Irish club gig was coming up. And he said, hey, why don't we do something? So I'm like, yeah, why don't we do something? and we roped Aggie in to do a couple of Rainbow tunes. He had that kind of voice. And I guess we did some Whitesnake and stuff like that. And I was doing the vocals there. And the gig went pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
Just quickly, so, Aggie surname?
Aggie de Aguiar.
So he ran for a while a guitar shop.
I could be, yes. In fact,
I was there, yeah, and he sold Jacksons. Yeah, sorry,
Magnet Music. I was general manager of Magnet Music. He worked for me there. Yeah, and then we went to LA, and he took over the shop.
Amazing, cool.
Yeah.
Isn't that the gig when you ran across the tables with your long legs stretched?
That's the Irish club gig.
Yeah.
All 6, 7, 8, 9 of you. Was that the one? Yeah.
Yeah. So it went rather well. So Gary had this club for a minute, and we did a second appearance there, which also went pretty well. But apparently the club was subject to some attrition by the patrons, and did not last the hold on as a going concern. So there was that. And then Gary and I decided, hey, I've got 6 months, 8 months before I'm going to LA with my wife, who's a powerhouse vocalist. And we figured, okay, we'll form something. It sounds a bit like Unchained, about 6 to 8 months worth.
Yeah.
In 87.
Wow.
And we formed an outfit called Coup de Grace.
Wow.
And we played whatever we could play. We played with Pete Buerta in Pretoria. And stuff like that, but it was known that it was only going to have a short shelf life because we were going to LA. So that's then exit me, and we reconstituted BBC Paris in Los Angeles as a prog informed heavy rock band. Completely rewrote the way the music was for that name, and continuing to this day, actually doing some recordings with Gary right now.
Wow!
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did I have a power trio. It's a recording project called Shadowscape. We put out an album in 21 on Bandcamp.
I've got it. I live absolutely outstanding, brother.
And the benefit of all that is you didn't have to sing enough Afrikaans.
Well, I didn't get anywhere near Voortrekker Hoogte, so. So anyway, that's kind of the way it is up to leaving for LA in '87. I got into fusion guitar, Al Di Meola, this kind of stuff way early on after my Deep Purple initiation. So I kind of draw on some different things in terms of guitar playing. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Gaskill, I see the picture in the back. Gaskill's looking for another vinyl. If he's got, is that a BBC?
Yeah, there it is. Splendido Hotel.
Oh, fuck, he's got it all. I tell you, Dean Smith, what competition, bruv?
I've got that record.
Of course you do. And the I know you.
Jazz rock and roll.
Yeah,
beautiful music.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's kind of where it is. Any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I've got one. It's like, so of the original founding bands like Lynx, I'm not going to say fucking Unleashed guys. I'm going to say Unchained.
Dean's going to say Iron Fist when he's drunk, but we won't go.
Okay, but so the majority of the bands, at least 60-70% of those bands left overseas. In the mid 80s, yeah.
We had to leave to try and do something else because there was nowhere to go.
Yeah.
I was rather saddened when Gary Walker decided to leave, but I was running a music store at the time, and I think it was like the next day he shows up. I'm like, welcome back. Apparently they cannot live around at Heathrow.
I arrived at Heathrow thinking I was a rock star with my hair and earrings and these tight black and white jeans, and they took one look, and carrying a guitar as well.
Of course.
One look at me and said, "Come here, dude, in the back room." And I was out on the next plane home.
Oh no!
Well,
can I be as bold as can I make a statement? And I've had probably about a bottle of mezcal, so you can delete this, Greg, if you like. But I have to say, hand on heart, all the folks on here tonight have been fucking godfathers. If it wasn't for them, I would not have done what I've done. I mean, I've joined a Christian country and Western band, as you all know, but there's one guy to me who fucking set the fucking stage of getting a band and going and making South Africa heavy metal happen, and his name is Gary Walker.
Yeah, you've been there from the beginning, Gary. Yeah.
Sorry, Chris.
Gary, honest to God, look at this. I got fucking hairs on my balls are standing up. Honest to God, it wasn't for you. And there's all the guys on the fucking tube here are massive kudos to all of them. Konrad, Tanaro, one of the best frontmen I've ever seen in my life. Remember, I used to fucking stand in front of the stage pushing the people back at the Aragorn gigs. But kudos has to go. No, Gary Walker to me was the fucking man. And anyway, and Greg, you can edit the fuck out of this. It's fine. But that's my 10 pence. Dean, young Dean Smith, I'd love to hear your view. If I'm wrong or right, brother.
Bro, I was going to say the same thing. Like, I was lucky enough to be born from a mother who was a fucking total headbanger, and she still is. So I was like born into the heavy scene. In the womb, I was listening to Sabbath and all that shit. And although, like all of us, the rest of us, we all had our records, our AC/DCs and Sabbaths and Kiss. We had all that shit, but it wasn't accessible. It was a record in our hands. And then we started going, when we were old enough, going out into Hillbrow and stuff. And Gary Walker was the first fucking guy I ever saw on stage. And I know I said it in the chat the other day. He's like the white fucking planet for me, bro. The way you played that bass and you sang, man, we had fucking stars in our eyes, bro. Gary,
you guys are embarrassing me. Come on.
And Vincent and Konrad, honestly, you are the people that made us want to fucking be on that stage. That first gig, that Stretch was talking about at the Irish Club, that was the first gig I ever played in my life. And these guys had the decency to let us come and play there. We fucking couldn't play. We played out of time. We did shitty covers, but they let us play. Stretch running across the tables was like, I would never seen anything like that in my fucking life.
6'9" of all of him, fucking like a fucking
I don't know how his head didn't go through the fucking ceiling.
Listen, just to pay it back a bit, I just want to say, the bass player South African bass player that I always admired, and a dude whose songwriting abilities I'm still very much admire, is this guy over here, Chris Gaskill. And the other thing I want to say is the best guitar player ever to come out of South Africa is also on this, and that's Robert Stretch Schoonraad.
Hey.
I don't agree with Gary, because I'm going to turn it around, and I think he was better than I was. But I think we always had mutual respect for each other with our bands and that, and we all went our own ways and did our own thing. And luckily enough, Gary and I hooked up a couple of years back, and he came down to Exeter where I live, and we hooked up after how many years was it, Gary? Nearly 30 years.
38, 39 years, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like the stories, and it was just what a treat.
Chris, your bands, like Unchained and the bands Gary was in and Stretch, like besides, I know I mentioned earlier that the Osiris gig was probably the most professional, as in presentation, that I'd seen in South Africa, but watching Unchained and Black Rose and Razor and Stretch in those small clubs in Joburg, was the same as us being watching the AC/DC videos and the Kiss videos on Pop Shop. You guys were so fucking professional.
Sorry, Dean. Basically, we had to make our own entertainment.
Yeah, man.
Because there was nothing else there. We didn't get the bands there. We got on there, so we had to make our own entertainment, and we were friends with the fans. We partied with them. We did that. There weren't someone down there. They were just like, "Come and join us."
Yeah, man.
You know, we're up there doing it. You can do it as well. And luckily for us, you guys carried on doing it.
Yeah, man.
And can I just say something here? Do you know that one of the key takeaways for me is that what you guys said earlier is that most bands are so fucking competitive globally. If you're in a band and there's a band room, you got to jam and you practice. Generally the bands don't want to practice next to each other because you just don't want to do that, right? Because ego, fucking starved, they're going to steal our fucking riffs. What you guys said earlier was just fucking mind-blowing. How many of those bands you guys back in the day were jamming and practicing in the same band rooms almost at the same time? So you'd finish and go and get the piss on with the next band and go, hey, great stuff, and we'd share riffs. And that's something fucking unique that does not happen in the music business at all. And it's extraordinary. And I tell you, I think that is, dare I say, it's a unique South African thing in a way.
Yeah. Also because, Gary, remember that lot?
Just quickly. We have to reconnect again. I think we're going over. hate to be the bringer of bad news.
But, Gary, you remember going to the Bungo, that studio?
Oh, yeah.
And, a few parties there.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, listen to Rafe Levine's rock show.
That's it.
Those are good times, man.
Very good times. Very good.
Hey, just a quick thing here. Bleed through the rehearsal room wall. It's not always a bad thing. When I was rehearsing BBC Paris here in Los Angeles, the rehearsal rooms here are pretty organized. You got 5 units or 6 units, whatever. Anyway, we got finished with this particular rehearsal room was attached to a recording studio. So we got finished, and the engineer from the recording studio comes into the room where we are. He says, I need to record you guys. So bleed through studio walls is not always a bad thing.
Can I just give my 2 cents worth on the practice rooms? It's actually quite funny because we had a practice room in Loop Street, and Bright Blue was actually just above us. And they always used to complain about us being too loud. And the one night, the little guy with the glasses, he actually came down. He was quite a sweet person. He just said, guys, we love your music, but can you please just play a little bit softer? And I'll never forget it because then soon after that, they had their monstrous hit that they did have with...
Well, I could tell a story about a certain band. I won't mention names because Dean was involved. And they used to rehearse next to a goth South African band with a beautiful girl who used to play drums, and their bass player, after the rehearsals were over, he'd go over and sniff the band stool. Anyway,
these people weren't friends of Harry, were they?
The wicked silence spreads its face across the room. Snuffing strands of sanity could be heard across his tomb. Competition rules have stated no one needs to die. Just live quickly now, there's no need for a goodbye. And it's a raw deal for the small whales and some raw deal for the competition rules. You face the glare of hungry stares as you stand to fight fool. A web of lies and small diseases they play without their rules.